She walked into my house like everything was perfect, hand resting on her stomach, eyes shining like polished glass, and said one word that changed the air in the room. Twins. I froze. For a second I thought my heart had stopped. My lips parted, but no words came out. Then I smiled, wide and teary, because I believed her. I believed her with every part of me that had waited years to hear something good. I reached for her hand and whispered, "Two?" My voice cracked like the floor might split open beneath me. She nodded and laughed, like someone delivering a miracle. I still remember the way my knees gave out just a little. I sat down because I couldn't trust my legs to hold the weight of that joy. I told her I was proud of her. I told her I'd be here for anything she needed. I told her I'd start sewing right away. I would have given her my last breath if she'd asked for it that day. But the truth is, what she brought into my house wasn't joy. It was the beginning of something I didn't see coming. It wasn't a blessing. It was a scheme dressed in a smile. And I'm still here to talk about it, because I didn't let it break me. But before I do continue, I want to thank you for staying with me. And please do also, tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had someone lie straight to your face with sweetness in their voice. You don't even have to explain. Just right, I see now. That's enough. I was 68 when this all happened, but I had lived more than one life already. I raised my son alone, no helping hand, no steady partner, just me, my worn shoes and 3 jobs that barely kept the roof from caving in. I've cleaned motel rooms with broken vacuums, folded laundry till my fingers cramped, and stood behind grocery counters smiling through bone-deep tiredness. And through all that, the only thing that kept me moving was him. My son. He never asked for more than I could give, and when he could, he gave back tenfold. He was the kind to leave thank you notes in my coat pockets, the kind who remembered birthdays, not just mine, but neighbors, cashiers, anyone who showed him kindness. He bought flowers for no reason, just to soften someone's Monday. That's the kind of heart he had. That's the heart she saw. Lacey, she walked in like sunlight but left a shadow wherever she went. Pretty, yes. Always had something charming to say. Always just the right compliment, the right little giggle, the kind of laugh that doesn't reach the eyes. I remember the first time I met her. She brought me peach cobbler. Still warm, wrapped in a towel. Said it was her grandmother's recipe. I didn't eat it. Not because I was suspicious, but because something about her felt too rehearsed. Like she knew what kindness looked like, but had learned it from watching others, not from feeling it herself. But my son saw her and only her. He didn't see the way she scanned the room, didn't notice how she looked past people when she thought no one was watching. That's what love does sometimes. It softens your focus, makes the edges blur, dulls the warnings. He saw her smile and thought he'd found peace. I saw her smile and wondered how long she could keep it up. At first, it was little things. She didn't like doing dishes, said her hands were sensitive. Fine. Then she stopped helping clean altogether. Said bending hurt her back. Fine. Then she didn't come to his work parties, said she was shy. Fine again. But it kept stacking. One excuse on top of another, until I started to wonder if she was building a wall between him and the world, and didn't want him to see what was outside it. I'd mention things gently. Ask how she was doing. Ask if everything was okay. She'd smile, always with that sweet smile, and say, "Just tired." I let it go, more times than I should have. Because he loved her, and I didn't want to be the reason that love bent. I told myself maybe I was just overthinking, maybe I was just being too careful. But small lies, when fed daily, grow teeth. And I didn't realize how sharp those teeth were until they bit down hard. She started wearing those big cardigans, the ones that hang like blankets and hide everything beneath them. Said she was cold all the time, even when the sun was warm enough to make the window glass sweat. I didn't question it at first. I mean, every woman's different. Some show early, some don't. That's what I told myself. That's what I clung to. But the days kept passing, and every time she visited there was nothing. Not a curve, not a gentle rest of the hand, not even the glow people talk about. Just sweaters, scarves, and excuses. She never once brought up doctor visits on her own. When I asked, she'd smile and say, "Oh, it was fine," then change the subject so fast I'd forget what I was even asking. No photos, no appointment cards on the fridge, no names of clinics, No stories about heartbeats or little kicks, just stories about being tired, being emotional, needing rest. But I've lived long enough to know when someone is avoiding the truth. She never looked down at her stomach the way mothers do, like they're already protecting something. No absent-minded touches, no wincing when sitting, no slow movements. Just perfectly timed discomfort when someone mentioned going shopping for strollers or setting up a registry. Meanwhile, my son, he was working himself ragged. Took on weekend shifts and odd jobs on top of his regular hours. He was sending her money almost every week. Said it was for vitamins, special care, a custom-made crib. One time, he pulled me aside and said, "Ma, they want us to get this organic mattress thing, safer for their spines. Lacey found it." I nodded, tried to smile. But inside me, something curled. Something stiffened. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe the life growing in her was real. But every time she walked past me with that flat stomach and that bright grin, my heart whispered that something was wrong. I remember suggesting we throw a little something. Just a meal, nothing big. A chance for friends to come by, offer a few gifts, share the joy. She stiffened. Said she wasn't ready for that kind of attention, that she needed time. I didn't push, but I noticed how she always had a reason to keep people away. No photos on social media, no family check-ins. Not even a single baby book on the coffee table. She said she wanted a home birth. Said hospitals were too cold, too clinical. Said she'd already picked a doula, some woman with no address, no contact, no website. She told my son she didn't want interference. Said she needed calm, privacy, spiritual peace. And he, bless him, agreed. Because when you love someone, you listen. Even when the things they say start to sound like barriers instead of boundaries. I didn't accuse her, I didn't argue. I just started writing things down, dates, statements, little moments that didn't sit right. I took photos when I could, kept screenshots when she sent things through messages. I knew better than to charge in without proof. Life had already taught me that people who lie with confidence will always spin your anger into guilt. So I waited, patiently, quietly, until something came along that cracked the whole thing open. And it did. One afternoon, when I was reaching for flour at the grocery store, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. And what she said stopped me cold. It was a Tuesday afternoon. One of those quiet days when the store's half empty and the air smells like fresh bread and lemons. I wasn't even planning to go out, but we'd run low on flour, and something in me just needed to keep moving. To keep doing. I was reaching for a bag on the top shelf, same brand I'd always used, when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned, and there she was. Morgan. I hadn't seen her in months. Her hair was pulled back in a sloppy bun, no makeup, hoodie half-zipped, and eyes that looked like she hadn't slept in days. She smiled quick, but her mouth didn't match her eyes. Something was wrong. You could feel it before a word came out. I said hello, gentle, polite, trying not to show the questions already crawling up my throat. She nodded, fidgeted with the strap of her purse, then asked in a voice too small for someone so full of secrets. "So, have you seen the babies yet?" I just looked at her. I didn't blink, didn't tilt my head, didn't even pretend to misunderstand. I let the silence sit between us until she shifted her weight and looked down at the floor. She mumbled, "You haven't, have you?" And I told her I hadn't, that I hadn't seen a thing except loose sweaters and receipts. That's when her shoulders dropped. Like she'd been carrying something too heavy for too long, and suddenly couldn't fake it anymore. She looked around, then leaned in close and whispered, "I didn't want to get involved. I told myself it wasn't my place. But I can't watch her do this to you. Not to him. I just can't." She told me everything. Said Lacey never had an appointment, never even set foot in a clinic. Said the photos she showed my son came from an image search, and the bump was just folded, towels held in place by a belly band. She had the due date marked on a calendar, not for the birth, but for when she planned to say she lost them. She was going to cry, claim stress, ask for space, and keep collecting money in the name of grief. Morgan's voice trembled. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Said she'd tried to talk Lacey out of it more than once, but Lacey had this way of twisting things, making you feel cruel for questioning her, heartless for not helping. She said it started with little lies, just like I'd suspected. A skipped period, a fake test, a story about nerves. But once she realized how fast the money came, she couldn't stop. Morgan said she thought it would all end quietly. She thought Lacey would feel guilty and back away. But it just kept growing. And my son? He was nothing but a name on her list. A card she played every time the rent was due. Morgan looked like she might cry. She said she couldn't sleep. That every time she saw my son, smiling and working hard, believing in something that wasn't real, she felt sick. She said she kept thinking about me too. The way I looked at Lacey with kindness, with hope, the way I made space in my life for someone who had no intention of keeping hers honest. She said, "I didn't mean to betray anyone, but silence feels like betrayal now." I nodded, not because I forgave her or understood her right then, but because I knew what it meant to carry a truth that burns. I thanked her, asked if she'd be willing to put anything in writing. She hesitated, then agreed, said she'd send me everything she had, texts, screenshots, even a photo of the fake belly in Lacey's closet, the one she'd seen during a sleepover when Lacey thought no one would ever find out. I walked out of that store with nothing but flour and fire in my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just went home, pulled out a folder, and started printing. That's how you win with the truth. Not by yelling, not by fighting dirty, but by preparing quietly while they think you're asleep. When I got home that afternoon, I didn't sit down. I didn't pour myself tea or call anyone or even take off my shoes. I walked straight to the kitchen table, pulled out the old laptop I barely used anymore, and opened a new folder. I gave it a name that meant something only to me. Then I opened the drawer where I kept the stack of envelopes Devin had handed me over the past few weeks. Receipts, order forms, screenshots of things she'd asked him to buy. I looked at them with new eyes now. Not just as slips of paper, but as puzzle pieces. I started matching dates to bank statements, watching the pattern form. One week it was for custom onesies, the next it was for herbal supplements from a store I couldn't find anywhere online. She even had him order a sound machine, said it would soothe the babies in the womb, said it was what all the modern mothers were using. I printed every receipt, highlighted the ones with suspicious shipping addresses, and clipped them together with quiet hands. Then I asked him, gently, so gently, if he had any photos she'd shared. Ultrasounds, messages, anything she'd sent that made him believe it all. He pulled out his phone without hesitation, still trusting, still proud. He showed me the messages where she said the twins were growing fast, that they might come early, that she was scared and needed him to stay strong for her. I asked him to forward them to me. Told him I just wanted to save them for our memories. He smiled, not knowing what I was really saving. I printed every text, labeled them by date, marked the ones with lies Morgan had already confirmed. I saw how she played him, how she sprinkled just enough sweetness to keep him hooked, just enough fear to make him dig deeper into his wallet, just enough silence to make him feel like he needed to do more. After he went home, I went to the closet in the guest room, the one she kept locked whenever she came over. I'd found the spare key months before, and never thought to use it. But now I did. I opened the door and stood there, staring. Everything looked perfect at first glance. A folded blanket, a tiny rocker, clothes still on hangers, but when I touched them, I saw the truth. Nothing had been washed, nothing had been worn, tags still hanging, sizes mismatched, bottles unopened. It wasn't a nursery, it was a stage. I took photos of everything. The closet, the tags, the untouched bottles, even the baby monitor she said was already set up. I zoomed in on dates, labels, price tags, anything that might prove how new it all was, how unused, how staged for a role she had no intention of playing. I printed those too, added them to the folder. Then I started calling around, not to friends but to people who knew what mattered. The clinic she claimed to visit had never heard her name. The midwife she mentioned didn't exist. The registry she said was private. I searched every name she might have used. There was nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't curse her name. I just kept going. Quiet fury doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be thorough. Every night, while the world slept, I worked. I built that folder like a case. Timeline, messages, photos, witness statement from Morgan. Even a list of purchases my son had made since she said she was expecting. I added notes, circled lies, wrote questions in the margins. I was tired, yes, but it wasn't the kind of tired that makes you stop. It was the kind that tightens your jaw and steadies your hand. Because I wasn't going to walk into this blind. I wasn't going to accuse her with nothing to hold. I wasn't going to give her the chance to twist my pain into confusion. No, I was going to look her in the eye one day soon. And I was going to place that folder in front of her like a mirror. And she would see every word she wrote, every trick she played, every dollar she pulled from a man who only ever gave with his whole heart. I was going to end it, but I wasn't going to end it with shouting or fists or threats. I was going to end it with facts, with proof, with the weight of truth stacked so high. Even her smile couldn't stand up against it. It was just past 7 in the morning when the message came through, one of those drawn-out texts full of sweet words and sugar-coated panic. She said the twins were measuring ahead, that the doctor was concerned about space, and that she needed to order a bigger crib by that evening. The tone of the message was all urgency and emotion, the kind designed to pull at the heart. She said she hated to ask but didn't want to worry Devin because he'd been working so hard, and could I please help just this once? Just 500, and she'd make sure everything else was covered after that. It was the same voice she always used in those messages, gentle, almost trembling, dressed up in guilt so you couldn't see the demand behind it. I stared at the words for a long time. I read them twice, then again. She had no idea what I knew. She had no clue that every excuse, every made-up doctor visit, every lie dressed in sympathy was already printed, time-stamped, and sitting in the folder by my kitchen window. I didn't respond right away. I let it breathe. Let her wait. Then I typed back as calm as ever. I told her, of course, I'd help. That I was so glad the babies were growing strong, and I'd love nothing more than to hand her the check in person. I told her I'd have tea ready, maybe even something sweet. I said come by around 5. And she agreed. Just like that. The rest of the day passed slow and steady, like my hands when I baked the first pie after my husband passed. Careful, measured. I didn't rush. I cleaned the table, dusted the chairs, wiped the smudges off the picture frames in the hallway. I boiled water for tea, set out 2 cups, picked the one with the blue roses for her because she'd said once it reminded her of her childhood. I didn't do any of this out of kindness. I did it because I wanted her to feel safe, welcomed, unsuspecting. I wanted her to walk into that house and believe she was still holding all the power in the room. Because people like her, they crumble when you take that belief away without warning. Then I took out the folder. It was heavier than it looked. I had added more pages the night before. Copies of financial transfers, a printout of the online listing for the exact same ultrasound she had sent my son, proof that the image had been taken from a public medical forum years ago. I added a page that listed every fake item she'd claimed to buy, and right next to each one, I placed a photo of it sitting untouched in that locked closet. The final page was Morgan's statement, signed, dated, and honest. I placed the folder at the center of the table. I didn't open it. I just let it sit there like a waiting storm. As the hour drew near, I turned off the TV, lit the lamp by the window, and sat down in my usual chair. I kept my hands folded, breathing even. The house was quiet, the way I like it. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel angry. What I felt was something deeper, something colder, the kind of stillness that only comes after the truth has been laid bare. Because by that point, there was nothing left to wonder about. I had seen enough, heard enough, and collected enough to know what kind of woman she really was. And when someone shows you who they are over and over, eventually, you stop doubting the picture. 5 o'clock came, and right on time, I saw her car pull into the drive. She got out with her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, wearing a soft beige sweater, clutching her phone in one hand and her purse in the other. She was smiling. That smile again. The one that looked so pretty to someone who didn't know better. But I knew now. I knew it like I knew the lines on my own palms. I stayed seated, hands still folded, waiting for the knock that came just 30 seconds later, 3 soft taps on the door. I rose, walked over, opened it, and greeted her like I always had. With warmth in my voice and history behind my eyes. She didn't see it. Not yet. But she was about to. And what she walked into that evening wasn't a house filled with sympathy. It was a room prepared for truth. She walked in smiling like always, wearing that soft beige sweater that hung loose around her like it was hiding secrets, not skin. She leaned in for a quick hug that I didn't return all the way, just enough to keep up appearances. Her perfume was light, something floral, like she wanted the air to love her even if the people didn't. She looked around the room like she was checking if everything was still in place, still under her control. Then she stepped over to the chair across from mine, the one I'd pulled out just for her, and sat down with a little sigh, placing her purse gently beside her and folding her hands in her lap like a woman with nothing to hide. She even placed her hand on her stomach, casually, softly, like there was something real there, something to protect. I watched her do it without blinking. I didn't ask how she was. I didn't mention the message. I simply poured the tea. Quiet, steady, without rush. She thanked me like she always did, all politeness and honey, then started into small talk. She told me about the weather, about how traffic had been light, about how tired she felt lately. She talked and talked while I listened, nodding gently, never interrupting. I let her build her stage, let her enjoy the spotlight a few minutes longer, because I knew what was coming, and I wanted her to walk straight into it. She reached for the sugar, asked if I had the check ready. And that was when I did it. I slid the folder slowly across the table toward her. It made the faintest sound against the wood, a quiet shift that changed everything. Her hand paused midair. She looked at it, blinked once, then twice. Her smile slipped like wet paint on glass, losing its shape before she could stop it. I didn't speak. I just kept looking at her, watching the shift behind her eyes as she tried to decide what version of herself to become next. She reached for it with careful fingers, opened the cover, and the first thing she saw was a printout of the ultrasound she'd sent my son, right next to a screenshot showing the exact same image on a public medical forum, dated 5 years earlier. She flipped the page, and there were her texts, color-coded, printed, marked by date. Messages to Devin, messages to me. Messages filled with made-up doctors, made-up symptoms, made-up emergencies. She looked up at me. I didn't flinch. She turned another page, and there was Morgan's statement. Her signature, her words, her truth. The next page showed photos from that locked closet. The untouched clothes, the tags still hanging, the bottles still sealed, the stuffed animals arranged just so, like someone decorating a store window, not a room filled with real anticipation. The silence between us stretched, tight as wire. I could see her panic starting to rise, the way her chest lifted faster, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the folder like she could tear it in half and make it disappear. She opened her mouth, but I raised my hand gently, the way you hush a child before they speak too soon. This isn't a conversation, sweetheart. It's a conclusion. Her lips closed again, trembling slightly. She looked back down at the folder, then up at me, like she was still trying to find a door out of the truth. I didn't move. I didn't soften. I had given kindness. I had given trust. I had given time. And she had answered every one of those gifts with deception. What sat between us now was not anger, not rage, it was fact. Documented, dated, undeniable. The truth didn't need to shout, it just needed to be shown. And I had shown it. She blinked, once, then again, and I knew, in that moment, she realized she had nowhere left to run. The silence between us sat heavy, thicker than steam, and just as suffocating. But I didn't move, and I didn't blink. I could see her jaw working, her hands twitching slightly at the edge of the folder, like she was trying to decide if she could still claw her way out of this with charm or pity. Then came the shift. Her eyes watered. She reached for her throat like the tears were catching there. Her voice came out cracked, a trembling whisper, and she said it wasn't supposed to go this far. That's how it always starts. Not with ownership, not with honesty, but with a carefully placed seed of guilt. She said she had been scared, said she hadn't meant to hurt anyone, said it all began as something small, a white lie to feel secure, to see if he really cared, and then it snowballed. She tried to make it sound like she was the one who got trapped, like she had no choice but to keep pretending because she didn't know how to stop. She talked about her past, about things I'd never heard before, a strained childhood, abandonment, pain, old wounds that never healed. She told it like a confession, but her voice had the practiced rhythm of someone who'd done this dance before. The tears fell, and she didn't wipe them right away. She let them roll down her face slowly, like she wanted me to see them, believe them, feel them. But I didn't move. I've been lied to before, but not like this. Not with a smile. Not with a lie that curled itself around something as sacred as life. Not at the cost of my son's peace. She sat there crying, speaking in circles, reaching for sympathy like it was a rope she thought I'd throw back to her. She said she regretted it. She said she loved him. She said she didn't know how to undo the damage, but the damage had already been done. Not just to his wallet, not just to his pride, but to his sense of reality, his belief in people, his ability to trust. And that kind of damage? That doesn't get fixed with a few tears and a trembling voice. I let her speak. I let her unravel. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I just let the moment stretch until her words began to slow, until her sobs softened into breathless silence. Then I reached down beside me and pulled out the envelope I had prepared. I slid it across the table, slow and steady, the same way I'd done with the folder. She didn't reach for it right away. She just stared at it, blinking, as if hoping it was something else, anything else. But when she finally opened it, the color drained from her face completely. Inside was a copy of the cease and desist letter I had drafted through a legal advisor, a notice outlining potential charges related to fraudulent behavior, and a formal statement from Morgan confirming the events, signed and dated. I watched her read each page, her fingers trembling, her shoulders shaking not from grief, but from the sudden realization that this wasn't going to be buried. This wasn't going to disappear. She had danced with lies, and now the floor beneath her was giving out. She didn't say another word. She didn't ask questions. She didn't beg. She just slowly closed the folder, tucked the papers back into the envelope, and stood up. Her hand brushed her stomach one more time, a hollow gesture now, like muscle memory from a performance she could no longer sell. She picked up her purse, turned toward the door, and walked slowly across the room. She didn't slam it. She didn't throw a final insult or demand forgiveness. No, she closed the door like a child sneaking out of a room she was never supposed to be in. Quiet, careful, and gone. And I sat there, staring at the empty chair she left behind, not because I was heartbroken or shaken, but because I was finally breathing clean air again. The lies had left the room and the truth, heavy, bitter, sharp, had finally settled. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I just sat there and held the stillness, because some victories don't come with applause. They come with silence and the steady beat of a heart that refused to break. After she left, I gave myself a moment, just one, to sit still and let the air settle. Then I called my son, told him I had something to share, and I needed him to come by, alone. He didn't ask questions, just said he'd be there soon. When he arrived, he looked tired, more than usual. There was something in his eyes, like he was carrying a weight, but didn't know where it came from. I sat him down at the same table, cleared everything else away, and placed the folder in front of him. I didn't speak at first. I let him open it himself. Page by page, he read. His face didn't change much at first. He just kept reading, one hand clenched on the edge of the table, the other flipping slowly through the mess of printed lies and stolen trust. Then he reached the last page, the statement from Morgan, and something broke in him. He didn't say a word. He didn't ask how I found out. He just dropped his head into his hands and wept. Not loud, not wild, just quiet sobs that filled the room like a storm with no thunder. I hadn't seen him cry like that since he broke his arm falling off the swings when he was 7. But this time, I couldn't kiss it better. There was no bandage for this kind of wound, no cast for what she'd done to his spirit. I wrapped him in the old blanket from the couch, the one I used to wrap around him when he was small and shivering after rain. I held his hand and let him cry. Not because I had all the answers, but because I knew sometimes the only thing that helps is knowing someone is still there, still holding on when everything else feels like it's falling. He finally looked up and said one thing, barely louder than a whisper. I thought it was real. And I understood. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the lies. It was about the hope. The picture he'd built in his head of who she was, of what their future would be. She hadn't just lied. She'd taken something precious and twisted it into something he couldn't hold on to anymore. And all I could do was sit beside him, still and steady, while he let go of the dream she'd planted. It was almost 2 weeks to the day when I heard the knock again. Not rushed, not angry, just soft, like someone hoping not to be turned away. I opened the door, and there she stood, eyes red, mascara trailing, voice already shaking before she spoke. She said she'd made a mistake. Said she didn't know what came over her. That she only wanted to feel important, feel loved, feel like she belonged somewhere. She said it was never supposed to go this far, that she panicked, that she truly wanted a family. Her words came out in pieces, and her hands trembled like she expected me to pull her back inside, to comfort her again, like nothing had happened. But I didn't move from the doorway. I listened. Yes, because that's what I've always done. But when she finished, I looked her straight in the eye and told her something I hoped would finally stick. I said, real family doesn't lie about something so sacred. Real family doesn't build a story with glue and glitter, hoping no one looks close enough to see its hollow inside. She opened her mouth like she had more to say, maybe another version of the same apology, but I shook my head gently and said I wasn't angry anymore, just tired of poison disguised as promises. Then I closed the door. A few days later, my son and I boxed up everything from that locked closet. The clothes, the bottles, the toys still in their wrappers. We took it all to a women's shelter across town. They were grateful, and I was quiet because I didn't need to say anything. The act was the closure. That same afternoon, Morgan stopped by. We sat outside for a while, sipping tea in the breeze, the folder now locked away where it belonged. We laughed about how she almost told me everything back at Thanksgiving. She said she could see it in my eyes even then, that I already knew, or at least suspected. She said she didn't know how I stayed so calm. I told her it wasn't calm. It was clarity. And that sometimes peace doesn't come from getting even. It comes from walking away without looking back. If someone ever looked you in the eye and told you what you wanted to hear, just to get what they wanted, I see you. If they spoke in soft tones while undoing your trust one breath at a time, I see you. And if you held your tongue, not because you were weak, but because you were gathering strength, then you already know the kind of power silence holds. Some people lie with anger, but the ones who lie with sweetness, those are the ones that cut the deepest. If you've been through that, if someone faked care just to drain your peace, tell me in the comments. Or don't. Just write, I kept the folder. That's enough. And if you're watching this alone tonight, I want you to know you're not. You're not foolish for believing, and you're not broken for trusting. You're just human. And you're still standing. So go ahead and subscribe, and stay with us here, where truth matters and healing starts with being heard. Thank you for watching.